Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Assalamu alaikum, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to this session of moral lessons from the Quran. We will be reading another passage from the Quran and trying to remind ourselves of some of the basic moral precepts which are found in ourselves. And this is one of the very important activities that all of us should make effort to do in Ramadan to connect with the Quran as much as possible. The Quran is actually something which was it started to be revealed in Ramadan, and it is because of showing our gratitude to God that we fast in this month of Ramadan. So you can see there is a special connection between reading the Quran and the month of Ramadan. So the passage which I have selected today is from Surah Maarij, and the verses are from 23 to 35, and I'm just going to read out the text in translation first. الذين هم على صلاتهم دائمون والذين في أموالهم حق معلوم للسائل والمحروم والذين يصدقون بيوم الدين والذين هم من عذاب ربهم مشفقون إن عذاب ربهم غير مأمون والذين هم لفروجهم حافظون إلا على أزواجهم أو ما ملكت أيمانهم فإنهم غير ملومين فمن ابتغى وراء ذلك فأولئك هم العادون والذين هم لأماناتهم وعهدهم راعون والذين هم بشهاداتهم قائمون والذين هم على صلاتهم يحافظون أولئك في جنات مكرمون. Who are always steadfast in their prayer, who set aside a fixed portion in their wealth for those who ask and for the deprived, and who testify to the day of reckoning and dread the punishment of their Lord. Indeed, the punishment of their Lord is a thing to fear. And those who persevere their chastity, and those who preserve their chastity, except from their wives and slave girls, for in their case they are not blameworthy. But they who seek to go beyond this, then it is they who are transgressors. And those who keep their trusts and promises, and those who stand firm in their testimonies, and those who guard over their prayers, it is they who will live in paradise with respect. So once again, dear participants, you can see this passage which is outlining the attributes of believers. It starts off with the all-important directive of the prayer. And the prayer, as you can see, is the foremost directive which links us, or the foremost way which links us to the Almighty. What is spelled out here is that hum ala salatihim da'imun, which means that they are always steadfast in their prayer. They are people who would not neglect their prayer for any reason, for any cause. This is something which is part of their life. It's like a habit which has become, it's ingrained in their nature. And just as the fodder for our physical being, we eat regularly, of course, to nurture our physical being. In a very similar way, the prayer is our spiritual fodder. It is needed to nurture our spiritual being. So the Quran says, "Alladhina hum ala salatihim da'imun." They are ones who are persistent in the prayer, who are steadfast in the prayer. They don't miss their prayer. At other instances, of course, we have been told that at times when there is discomfort, or a person is traveling, or other means of discomfort would be the case, then the Zohar and the Asr prayer can be combined and offered together, and even reduced. So they could be reduced from 4 to 2 each. And the Maghrib and the Isha prayer can also be combined. And as far as the Maghrib prayer, it cannot be reduced. It'll be the same 3 rakats, but the Isha prayer can be reduced to 2 rakat. And also the Quran tells us that if we are on a journey, we are traveling, or even when we are walking, فَرِجَالًا أَوْ رُكْبَانًا, whether we are walking or whether we are on a transport traveling, you can pray if the time of the prayer comes. So imagine that there is absolutely no need to defer the prayer if one is walking, or if one is traveling in a car in any direction, or a motorbike, or any means of transport, or maybe in an aeroplane, or any other way that we can travel. If the time of the prayer comes, then the Quran says that they are ones who don't neglect their prayer, because praying on time is essential. The Quran says, "Inna salata kanat al mu'minina kitabam mawquta." So the prayer has been made incumbent upon Muslims, upon believers, on prescribed times. So you see, you can clearly see that if we revolve our time or our activities, I would say, around the prayer, it is something which can be easily manageable every day. And a believer is someone who should always think about his whole day, and of course his activities or her activities, if they come such that the prayer time is also there. So you can, if you are on in your workplace and it is difficult for you to go out and pray, you can sit there on your chair and pray. If you are outside, you can pray in your car, even while walking. So all these things have been allowed by the Quran, simply because the Almighty wants us to pray on time. And of course, then there is another concession which I just mentioned, that even prayers can be combined, because at times it is not even possible to do so by praying them separately while walking or standing, or even doing some work. Because, like for example, if you have an exam, or if a surgeon is doing a surgery, so he will not be able to do so in such circumstances because of the critical nature. So even combining the prayers is something of an option, and this combining of prayers has a formula. So only the Zuhr and Asr can be combined at either times, and the Maghrib and the Isha can be combined at either time. So you can see that how simple it is for everyone to actually hold steadfast to this all important directive. And I've also been telling this all along, that the minimum amount which is mandatory on every person for the prayer is the farz, which of course would mean that if anything else is not possible, and if praying beyond the farz is not possible for time constraints or any other reason, then a person should rest assured that yes, he has or she has done the due by offering the farz rakat. The Quran then says that these are people who not only are steadfast in the prayer, وَالَّذِينَ فِي أَمْوَالِهِمْ حَقٌّ مَعْلُومٌ. They have a fixed portion in their wealth for those who ask, لِلسَّائِلِ وَالْمَحْرُومِ, and those who are deprived, which means that they are ones who are always willing to share whatever they have with the society in which they live. And this sharing with the society, you can clearly see, is something that a person can only do if he or she has this attitude, or this feeling of gratitude for the Almighty, because a person who is grateful to the Almighty would always like to share whatever he or she would have. And the Quran has actually made it mandatory that there is a fixed portion that has to be paid. Beyond that, of course, is anything that a person would like to do is his own sweet will. It would be a great act of charity, or and greatly rewarded. But there is a minimum amount which every person has to pay, which is what we call zakat. And we have been discussing this zakat separately in other talks, and it has some details. And because of the fact that there are a number of misconceptions which prevail regarding zakat, so therefore it has to be understood clearly, and one needs to be very vigilant in discharging and paying zakat, because most of the time we end up paying zakat through a very rough estimate, which might be correct, or alhamdulillah, or might not be correct at all. So it's all the more reason that when we are calculating zakat, then it has to be an exact calculation, something that we can be absolutely sure of, because these are God's dues. And just as we just cannot think that we can pray 3 rakats instead of 4, or 2 instead of 3, because it would be a blemish, an error. In a similar way, we cannot just think that by paying something which is less than the amount due on us, it would be fine. So just as we are vigilant regarding the prayer in counting the number of rakats, it's equally essential that we are vigilant in estimating accurately the zakat which is due on us. So وَالَّذِينَ يُصَدِّقُونَ بِيَوْمِ الدِّينِ, they are the ones who testify to the day of reckoning. وَالَّذِينَ هُمْ مِنْ عَذَابِ رَبِّهِمْ مُشْفِقُونَ إِنَّ عَذَابَ رَبِّهِمْ غَيْرُ مَأْمُونٍ. So these are people who testify to the day of judgment, which means that they are absolutely sure that they are going to be held accountable on this day. They are ones who will not be let go. They will not go scot-free, because if the Almighty has created this world in a way that He has given us His blessings, then He shall surely call us to account. And believers are such that they always testify to this day. They are always faithful to this day. And the month of Ramadan, you would be surprised to know, has a very special relationship with this accountability, because the Prophet Muhammad ﷺ is reported to have said that man qama Ramadanan imanan wa ihtisaban ghufira lahu ma taqaddama min zambihi, which means that person who fasts, man sama Ramadan, who fasts in the month of Ramadan with faith and with this sense of accountability, imanam wa ihtisaba, then all his minor sins, his blemishes, which he did regarding the rights of God, would be forgiven. So ihtisab, or self-accountability, and accountability is something which has a very special significance in the month of Ramadan, and believers are of this. They never miss this opportunity of regarding themselves to be held accountable before the Almighty. وَالَّذِينَ هُمْ لِفُرُوجِهِمْ حَافِظُونَ إِلَّا عَلَىٰ أَزْوَاجِهِمْ أَوْ مَا مَلَكَتْ أَيْمَانُهُمْ فَإِنَّهُمْ غَيْرُ مَلُومِينَ فَمَنِ ابْتَغَىٰ وَرَاءَ ذَلِكَ فَأُولَٰئِكَ هُمُ الْعَادُونَ. So again, it is said that they are ones who protect their private parts, who preserve their chastity, except from their wives and their slave girls. I've explained this a couple of sessions ago also, and at a number of other occasions, that slavery was something which was inherited by Islam, and the Quran launched a gradual movement to eradicate it, and ultimately it was totally eradicated, at least in as far as the directive was concerned. Earlier on, the first directive that was given to abolish slavery was that any new slave that could have been made was totally put an end to, because the first war which took place between the Muslims and the disbelievers was the Battle of Badr, and in that battle it was said that you just cannot capture prisoners of war and make them slaves. Remember, the greatest source of slavery in Arabia were wars. So men and women were captured and made slaves. And then, of course, they used to go through that bondage on everything that we know about it. So the first end that the Quran put to was that it regarded this capturing of prisoners of war and making them slave women or slave men. It was totally put an end to. And as I said, the rest was a gradual eradication, a system of directives which were given, and which I have been discussing at a number of places. Says, وَالَّذِينَ هُمْ لِأَمَانَاتِهِمْ وَأَهْدِهِمْ رَاعُونَ. So they are the ones who keep their trusts and promises. Now again, this is a very important facet, a very important trait of a believer, that whenever he gives his word, he stands by his word. And this is something which has to be realized, that it's not an ordinary thing. When you make a commitment to someone, then that commitment has to be honored come what may. Even if, for example, at times one might have to endanger one's life, one's wealth, even one's honor at times. So by endangering all these things, if we need to honor some word that we have given, then this is what the Almighty wants us. And at times, of course, there are emergency situations or there are exceptional circumstances in which we are not able to honor our word because of something which is so understandable that even the person with whom we have made a commitment would give that concession. So in such cases, it's always essential that we go and apologize to that person and present the excuse, because this is something which prevented us from fulfilling our promises. But we have to be very careful. If we are not able to fulfill a promise, then at the very beginning, we should not make that promise. So we have a habit at times of making commitments without realizing whether we would be able to fulfill them or not. So we have to be very realistic in this regard, and we just cannot be slack and think that, well, this is something which can happen. And then the Quran says, وَالَّذِينَ هُمْ بِشَهَادَاتِهِمْ قَائِمُونَ. Once again, something very important, that they are people who stand firm in their testimonies. So remember, there are times when we have to bear witness, when we are standing in the pulpit and there is a testimony and evidence that what we might need to give. So they, about such instances, the Quran says that believers are such that they fulfill these testimonies. And at other instances, the Quran has said that such is the nature of bearing witness to these testimonies, of bearing witness to justice, that if need be, they give witness against their own selves. I mean, which means that bearing witness might be something which might put them in a state of loss, which might afflict them with loss. So even that is fine. And then even if it goes against the interest of your parents or your kinsfolk, even then it is essential that you bear witness to what justice is, what justice stands for. At another place where a collective action or a collectivity has been referred to, the Quran says that such are believers that when they are faced with the situation that they have to judge an enemy and bear witness about the truth. So, لا يجرمنكم شنآن قوم على ألا تعدلوا. Even the enmity or the opposition which is offered by your enemies should not stop us from bearing witness to the truth. If your enemy is someone who needs justice to be dispensed with, then mere enmity should not be the thing that should stand in our way and we take revenge in this case. We have to be just to our enemies also. So such is the nature of this evidence that we would be held accountable. It's not an easy job at all, but then of course this is something which the Almighty has promised us to be, that its consequence would be a paradise. And finally, we are once again, you can see the whole passage ends with the directive it started. We know we started from salat or namaz or the prayer. So we see that it ends on the same directive. وَالَّذِينَ هُمْ عَلَى صَلَاتِهِمْ يُحَافِظُونَ. So they are ones who guard over their prayers, and أُولَٰئِكَ فِي جَنَّاتٍ مُكْرَمُونَ, and it is they who will live in paradise with respect. So often this is the case when there is something which is of supreme importance. So what the Quran does, it begins with that particular directive, and it will end on that particular directive. Those of you who have the chance of reading the Quran, you will find that this is a very common style of the Quran, that at times something which is very important, the Quran starts off with its mention, and once the rest of the directives have been mentioned, it once again brings that initial directive again, and signifying the fact that this is an extremely important thing. It's like a wall which is encircling all these directives. So our prayer is indeed like a wall. It encircles these directives. It's the beginning, it's the alpha and the omega. It's the beginning and the end. If we are able to protect all our undertakings through this wall of the prayer, which protects religion, then we are able to practice it in a very, very laudable way. So it's extremely important to understand how significantly one's God connection is affected by the prayer. And the prayer, of course, is the prayer of a person who feels that he would like the Almighty to listen to him, to forgive him, to hear his, to listen to our wishes and desires, and at the same time give us the assurance that when we are passing through difficult times, he would be the one who would accompany us. He would be the one who would be standing at our back. And this, as I've been saying all along, is one of the greatest means of God connection. And particularly, my dear viewers, in this month of Ramadan, the most effective prayer after the obligatory prayer is the tahajjud prayer. And each and every one of us who is able to get up at Sahri time has this opportunity to pray the tahajjud. So please do make an effort to get up a little more early, maybe 5 or 10 or 15 minutes, and whatever the Quran that you have in your mind, you can read it in that tahajjud prayer. And if that is not possible, you can hold the Quran in front of you and even read it, and try not to miss this opportunity. We are more than halfway through the month of Ramadan, and this is a blessing that we can reap simply by devoting some more time just before Sehri. So I will not now end my talk here, and I am now available for all your questions.
Thank you, Dr. Shehzad. The first question that I have is of Fatma. Fatma, please go ahead.
Assalamu alaikum.
Right.
So I want to know the status of 4 things in Islamic Sharia. Number 1 is akika. The second is shaving the newborn baby's head and then weighing that hair and giving that much of silver in charity. Third is reciting azan in the newborn baby's ear. And the fourth is about gurti, which is like one of the elderly, like, takes honey on their finger, they taste it, and then they make the baby taste it. So what is are these things optional, obligatory, not required in Islam?
I'll try to remember these questions. So the first question you asked was the issue of akika. So as far as akika is concerned, there is no such concept which is found in the Quran or the Sunnah which says that akika or the festivity of akika is something which is part of our Islamic Sharia. In fact, when the Prophet had asked about this question, he said, "Ana la uhibbul uquq." I don't like what this uquq or this akika is. Yes, what you can do is that if there is some birth of a boy or a girl in your house, then of course, if you would like to thank God for that, you can always sacrifice your animal. So the title of Aqiqah is something which the Prophet himself did not ascribe to. This is one of the reason was this, but that in earlier times, Aqiqah was a festivity of the age of ignorance or the age of Jahiliyyah, I would say, not ignorance, in which people would slaughter an animal, and that animal's blood would be sprinkled on the forehead of the newborn's child. And the purpose of sprinkling that blood was that this would keep that boy or a girl safe from any calamity or from any evil spirit. So the Prophet absolutely forbade it, and all that he said was that if you would like to thank God, because of course the birth of a boy or a girl is a matter of great joy, if you'd like to express your thanksgiving through qurbani, through slaughtering an animal, or through any other way, like charities, it's something, of course, that can be done. Weighing the hair or shaving the hair of the boy or the girl, it has no significance as far as religion is concerned. It is entirely something, if you think that it's hygienically or medically prescribed so that the hair it grows well, it can be done. Otherwise, this is not a religious prescription at all. Similarly, weighing the hair of that newborn child which has been cut and then giving an equivalent amount in silver or whatever, that again is something which is totally unfounded. And finally, giving azan or ikama in the ears of the newborn, again, this is an unfounded practice. It has become so famous that people think it's part of the Sharia, whereas in the first 6 or 7 centuries, there was not a sign of this practice. So this is more of a misunderstood religious practice.
And what about the last one, the gurti, where elderly?
The gurti which is given is again a cultural thing. It has nothing to do with religion. It's like just making the boy or the girl sweet something tasty or something which the family tradition would like the boy or girl to taste. It has no religious significance. So in all these questions that you have asked, there's just one thing that you can regard as religious, and that is that you can thank God through any means on the birth of a child, which could be sacrificing a goat or an animal, or even giving in charity. All the rest are basically festivities or cultural functions which have either arisen because of, as I said, culture, or they are misunderstood practices. Like, for example, giving the azan or the iqama in the ear of a newborn. This is such a rampant practice that people think that it was done ever since the time of the Prophet, whereas we have absolutely no evidence of that.
And regarding the sacrifice, there's no religiously prescribed account, like, for example, 2 goats for boy and 1 for girl.
Nothing at all. Like, there are certain narratives that do attribute the fact that the Prophet said something like that, but that has to be related to the Arab traditions of their times, because nothing religious about them. As far they would generally sacrifice 2 goats for boys and a single one for a girl. But this is nothing to do with religion. It was their own manner of celebrating the birth of a boy or a girl, because they thought that boys have, I mean, there are helping hands and they can grow and become part of support the father. So it was again something of a cultural practice. Religion does not endorse it. Today, if a boy or a girl has been born, you can sacrifice equal number of goats. You can sacrifice more for the girl. You can not sacrifice at all and give the money in charity. So all these options are available.
Thank you. Rajni, you can have your question now.
Assalamu alaikum.
Wa alaikum assalam.
Suppose I'm a traveler and they provide me a room, or already there in my flat where I can pray full namaz. So therefore my question is, can I pray namaz-e-kashr or pray full namaz? If I pray full namaz, is it considered like a bidah? And how to avoid bidah, as we the common people are very much unaware about it, actually what is bidah and what is not.
Right. So you see, as far as offering the full prayer or the qasr prayer is concerned, it relates to your own personal discomfort. If we gather all the traditions of the Prophet in which he prayed the qasr prayer or did not choose to do so, or did so after a particular number of course, or the miles, I would say, or the kilometers, if I converted the Arab distance into our metric system. So this was something which varied from journey to journey, signifying the fact that as long as you feel the discomfort of the journey, which means, of course, that you are still not settled down, you can do qasr. And this can vary from person to person. The same journey for one person could be cumbersome and could be more discomfort, could be of more uncomfortable nature, and he or she could do qasr. For some others, it could be perfectly okay. Similarly, if you travel by plane, maybe, or some other comfortable means, you would not at all feel this discomfort. So what you need to understand is that qasr prayer is basically related to the discomfort that we have. So as long as we feel that discomfort, wherever we are traveling, on whichever means of transport we are traveling, we have been given the concession to offer the qasr prayer. Remember, a concession is a concession. In spite of the concession, if a person wants to still pray the full prayer, well, he or she would have the choice. But as soon as a person reaches one's destination, or any other place that he or she would be going, it could be a short distance, it could be a long distance, and he or she no longer feels that discomfort, he or she now feels that, well, they have settled down at a place, then the full prayer has to be offered. So it's very simple. It's basically the discomfort in the journey which makes a person offer, or which should make a person offer, or realize that he can offer the qasr prayer. If the discomfort has disappeared, whatever the number of days have passed, whatever the distance that you have traveled, this is all immaterial. And precisely this is why we see in the traditions or the hadith that the Prophet would do qasr in various journeys at different instances, I mean at different distances. Sometimes he would do it on a shorter distance, sometimes on a longer distance, which tells us that, of course, that discomfort of the journey would vary from one journey to another, and also from one climate to another. Remember, it's very hot in the afternoon in Arabia. At night times and evening, there's generally a very cool breeze in the deserts that makes a person feel comfortable. So you see, all these circumstances have to be taken into consideration, and there's no need to calculate the distance that you have traveled, or the area that you traveled, or the amount of stay, because you know that today people would tell us that, well, you have to travel 9 days and the distance has to be 15 days and the number of stays should be 1 month, etc., etc. All this is actually, these are deductions made by the jurists, thinking that how the Prophet did his qasr prayer. Whereas I said, this is nothing of the sort. It's basically the discomfort which made the Prophet break his journey or do that qasr prayer on different occasions in different types of journeys, in different types of weathers.
Okay, sir. And how do we know that what is bid'ah and what is not?
Well, that's a very simple definition that what we know, that everyone who regards something to be religion, part of religion, which has not been prescribed by by God and the Prophet as religion, you add something and make it a religious obligation or a part of religion. This is what we call bid'ah.
Because there is many mazhabs, sir, and they said different things. So we are very confused about it.
Actually, you can just, evaluate everything on case-to-case basis, because the definition you should know, and if you know the definition, you can yourself decide whether something is a bid'ah or not. Remember, the act which is made part of the religion is something which is itself a religious act. When you make a religious act part of religion, which was never its part, then this is what is called bid'ah. Just to give you an example, that if a person says that, well, I will start praying six prayers or offer 6 prayers. So what he's doing is he is adding a religious act. And what is that religious act? An extra prayer. And he is making it part of religion and saying that, well, this is something that I start offering. So to make a religious act part of religion, whereas that religious act was never a part of religion, is what we call bid'ah or religious innovation.
Thank you, Shehzad Ahmed. You may go now.
Assalamu alaikum, Shehzad bhai. Question regarding slavery, and I would also request you to comment on something in a bit more elaborated way. So the second part first, somebody already asked a question regarding, giving azan in the year of a newborn. If I remember correctly, another good scholar like you, brother Amir Ghazdar, Dr. Amir Ghazdar, right? I'm never able to pronounce his second name correctly. In 2014, he told me, and he had a 1-hour session with me, he did his MPhil thesis on this exact same topic, where he researched every single hadith and material, and just like you said, for the first 4 or 5 centuries, there's no proof for it. So a comment from you is Al-Mawrid planning to publish his research material for laymen like me? Because the entire MPhil thesis was in Arabic, which we can't understand.
Yes, actually, we have requested him to translate it into Urdu so that it can be published. And I'm not very sure if he has done that or not, because this request was made to him a long time ago. I'm not fully aware of it, although I'm in touch with Amir. He was my student long time ago. So, perhaps you need to ask him again whether it has been translated or not.
Okay, I will. Though I poke him every year with the same question, I will do it this year as well. So, the question regarding slavery, Shehzad bhai. So the Quran ordained that either the war captives, we shall let them free just out of goodwill or good faith, right? Or we can take some ransom for them. Now, a most common question that I've heard or people have asked me, and I want clarification from a learned person like you, is when the enemies already know that Muslims have these 2 options, that they have to let go of the captives, even if we don't pay them any ransom. Why are they going to pay us any ransom? So that's the general question that I have faced a lot. Kindly comment on it. Thank you.
I think this is out of compassion, because you see, this was a compassionate thing which was offered. And you remember, the Arabs had a certain sense of honor also. So they would never go for something pro bono if they would think that they could pay for it. So the Arab psyche was there, and if they could afford it, of course, then there was something that they would do. And then there's another thing: if Muslims would like to impose that, remember, this is a condition which Muslims had to impose. So if they would think that there is something that they could earn from these criminals of war because of the losses or because of so many other things that have ensued, so it was like a penalty being imposed on the opposite side. So it's not that the choice is given to the people whose prisoners you have taken. The choice is given to the Muslims themselves. And this choice actually tells them that at times they can show compassion, and at other times, if this compassion is going to maybe make the other person more audacious, or if there is something that can be earned from a very rich enemy for the cause of the war itself, because of the war losses, So these are the two, I would say, very natural concessions that have been given, and the choice is actually rests with the Muslims themselves. So they have a choice to make, not the opposite side.
So if I understood you correctly, the Muslim has these two choices, and they cannot make those captive slaves because slavery has been abolished by Islam, but they
Right.
can keep them in jail or in captivity for as long as they deem fit. And it's their choice that either they keep them in captivity or they let them go for free or for some ransom, but they cannot enslave them. Is this understanding
No,
correct?
another thing which is essential is that even they cannot keep them in captivity unless they are war criminals. You see, there's one thing as being part of the enemy, for example, a common soldier. And then there are other people who are just not common soldiers, they are war criminals. They have conducted heinous crimes in the war field. They have maybe raped women or done something which is extremely of heinous nature. For such people, then there would be a war tribunal instituted and they can be punished as well. So you have three options. One option is that when you capture these, one option which is, or I can say there are four options, and the fourth is absolutely ruled out. The fourth is that you cannot enslave them come what may. Now we are left with three options. One is to set them free without any ransom. The other is to set them free with ransom. And the last option is that you don't set them free because of they're being war criminals. And if you've studied various wars, you'll find that there have been people who have committed heinous wars, and if they are captured, then they'll undergo a trial, and that trial will then, whatever the consequence of that trial, they can be punished as well. So remember, it's not that you are required to set free every kind of person that you capture. If the person you capture is a war criminal, then a case will be instituted. It shall be properly run in a court of law, and then a punishment can also be pronounced. And that punishment can also be the death punishment. But what cannot be done is that they cannot be enslaved.
Thank you, Shehzad. Loud and clear. Thank you very much.
Mr. Khwaja, you can have your question now.
Yeah, Assalamu alaikum, Dr. Sahab.
Walaikum assalam.
My question is basically my confusion about Salah time. Some people would just, as soon as Azan is called, they would just drop everything and go up and pray. And I know Quran says kitaban mawquta. Does it mean exact time whenever there is Azan, I drop everything? Or there's a window?
No, it means there's a window. Kitaba Mawquta means that there is a starting time and there is an ending time. So between the starting and the ending time, you have to offer the prayer. It doesn't at all mean that as soon as the Azan is said, it becomes mandatory for everyone to offer the prayer immediately. That's not what the Quran is saying. It says that the window that you have from which a time starts and then there is a time which ends. So you must not either do it before the starting time or cross the ending time. It has to be offered within that window.
I see, because I've seen some people walk out of the classroom in the university that it's now Salah time. Which
they should be told
that,
yes, they should be told that yes, the Salah time has started. It's not that this is going to end immediately as soon as you hear the Azan.
Adania, you can have your question now.
Assalamu alaikum, sir. Since we as humans have certain emotional phases, and we all have different level of an emotional connection with our Creator, but there are times when I don't feel like talking to Allah Ta'ala during prayer. It's been felt like some big moment, nothing else. Without, you can say, feeling any emotions or connection with Allah Ta'ala while offering prayer. So my question is, why do I feel this way, and what be done if I encounter such situation? This has led to some more questions, that what's the intention of offering a prayer should be? It's due to fear of Allah Mia, or it's because of developing a connection with Him, or I can say it's all about seeking for forgiveness or to please Him, or you can say it's just about to obey Him. What we should have in our minds before standing in front of Him?
So one thing that maybe would be helpful to you is that our connection with God when we are standing in front of Him, it's not always in the ultimate form. We human beings, we pass through various emotion cycles. At times we are extremely sad. At times we are very happy. At times we are in a hurry. At times we have some mood swings. So you see, because of the fact that we are human beings who pass through these various moods, so when we stand in prayer, it does affect our connectivity at that time. So whatever our mood would be, that would govern the nature of our connection with God. But having said that, you see, if we have certain things already clarified in our minds when we stand, I mean, well before the prayer time, and we try to understand the philosophy of the prayer itself, then it helps keep us that connection, whatever our mood swings or whatever our moods are. The foremost thing is that the prayer is a means of remembering the Almighty's favors and the amount of affection and mercy that He has shown to us. It's like acknowledging them. So just to give you this example from our own human plane, that whenever we receive a gift from someone, our immediate response is that we would like to pay that person back, and perhaps even better than the gift that we received. And this is something which is so natural. So the only thing is that we are seeing the person who is giving us that gift. In the case of God, because of this curtain between ourselves and God, we at times are not able to establish this connection, that actually whatever we are receiving, and we are, I mean, there is no need to elaborate on what we receive every day. The food that we eat, our eyesight, our so many faculties, and I mean, you know what are the favors of the Almighty are. So what happens is that because the person who is giving those favors is not like handing it over to us the way gifts are given to us when we meet our own individuals or our friends. So because we are not able to see God, so at times we tend to forget that whatever we are receiving every day, every single second, the breath that we are taking, the heart that is beating, the eyes which are seeing ceaselessly, this is actually a gift for someone, and we are receiving that every single instant, but we are not able to see that being. So if we are able to drench ourselves in this thought that when we are standing before God, we are basically trying to thank Him for the favors that He has given. We have not seen Him giving these favors, but we know that He is the cause of these favors. So the more we think about this, the more we will be inclined to stand up in a way that we would be in a position that we would be humbling ourselves before Him, we would be thanking Him. And then the second, of course, motive is that every time that we wake up in the morning and then we have a day to spend and we go to sleep at night, there are so many blemishes every now and then that emanate from us. We misbehave. I mean, at times we don't speak the truth. So many things that come out of us that we would be ashamed of. So when we stand in prayer, the second motive is that God, we would like to ask for that forgiveness, that the things that you gave us and which entailed that we should not have done something which was not the right thing to do, but still we could not help ourselves. So please forgive us for that. So gratitude and forgiveness are two pillars which make our attention focused towards God. And the more we practice it before the prayer, the more we will concentrate in the prayer. So this is like programming ourselves that basically when we stand up in the prayer, we are acknowledging something which is going on unchecked. The favors that we receive from Him, they are taken for granted. But I must not take them for granted, and I must keep counting them. This will make us grateful individuals. This will save us from potentially so many things that we are afflicted in life. So, and needless to say that if we are able to understand what we are saying in our prayer, because often we don't know what we are saying in our prayer. And lastly, I think I've also explained this a number of times, that there is a part of the prayer in which you can speak in your own language. So there are 5 things which are mandatory to be said in the prayer in Arabic. Allahu Akbar at all instances, of course, when you start the prayer, when you go in ruku and etc., all those instances, that is one. Then Surah Fatiha has to be said in Arabic. Then the Qur'an that you add to it after Surah Fatiha, that is the third thing that you have to say in Arabic. The fourth thing is Sami Allahu liman hamida. And the fifth thing is when you end the prayer by saying Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullah. These are the 5 instances in which you have to say the prayer in the Arabic language, come what may. But at all other instances, like for example in your ruku, in your sajda, when you are sitting in prostration, when you are sitting in between the sajda, the 2 sajdas, when you have started the prayer just before Alhamdulillah, where we say Subhanakallahumma, all these instances are prescribed to say anything, any prayer that comes to our mind in our own language. So if you are able to understand it, you will feel that as if besides those 5 obligatory parts of the prayer which have to be said in Arabic, I can talk to God in my own language. And that connection, when you speak to God in your own language in the prayer, you can just imagine how strong it would be. So you see, if you have this comprehensive knowledge regarding the obligatory parts of the prayer, how to pray, when to pray, and what to imagine while you're praying, it makes a prayer so interesting. And I tell you that that people who are so close to God, they disclose this experience to us, that they look forward to the prayer. They look forward to the time of the prayer simply because they feel that this would be a time in which they would really relish. And they are true servants of God who make their routine of every day such that they revolve all their life, all their daily routines, such that they would make those 5 prayers the center of their activity and know that, well, I will revolve the rest of the activity or the rest of the time of my day such that I'm able to offer these prayers in a very peaceful and a calm way. So it's a question of understanding the depth of the prayer, understanding how important the prayer is, and how important it actually affects us and makes us so close to God.
Thank you. Dr. Suhail, you may ask your question now.
My question is about the status of dhimmis. One of the many blemishes on the religion of Islam, other than slavery, is the status of dhimmis that the atheists love to talk about. Zimmis, okay. Zimmis or dhimmis, yeah, that's what I'm talking about. Okay. So that's one of the most blemishes on the face of Islam. Now, of course, when you talk to the atheist, because that's what their main objection is about the dhimmis, they would always say that when you talk about when you quote your quotation from the point of view of scripture, they would always say, "Oh, that's your personal opinion. Let's talk about history." But even when you look at history from non-Muslim historians, there is good evidence that the state of dhimmis was very well chalked out in especially 2 eras in Islam. One is in the time of Hazrat Umar, and then in the time of Andalusia in Spain, during the Andalusian Muslim Empire, when the Jews had their golden age for almost 300 years. And many Jew historians would actually admit to it. So there's good non-Islamic historical evidence that dhimmis were treated very, very fairly and with equity in many areas in Islam. So therefore, I was a little bit alarmed just recently to hear Ghamidi Saab. He's on this 33 objections. And recently he's talking about Tamam Hujjat. And during the Tamam Hujjat, he was going through, I think it was a couple of episodes back, when he was talking about the polytheists and how they were subjugated. And according to Ghamidi Saab, the status of dhimmis was of a status of humiliation. They were subjugated and they were given that status to tell them that they are actually inferior to the Muslim population of that time. Either they accept Islam or they accept a status of subjugation. Ghamidi Saab almost used some harsh words, not harsh as in humiliating them, but his words actually implicated a message of a status that was inferior to that population, which is quite contrary to what you find in history, especially when Hazrat Umar invaded Jerusalem and the second Andalusian era. So I was a bit confused about Ghamidi Saab's sources and why did he think what he think.
Well, as I said, I think I've been discussing this law, or the law of Tamam Hujjat, in a number of instances. You're referring to the fact that there is this phenomena of zimmitude, or the fact that there were not the people of the book who were required to submit and pay the jizya tax, and this was a sign of subjugation. What about the fact that even more severe was the punishment for the idolaters whose heads were to be chopped off if they did not accept Islam? So similitude is something even less, something even more grave is the fact that the idolaters, they were required to be put to death by the swords of the believers had they not accepted faith. And it was just in case, I mean, it was just, something which happened in their favor that all of them accepted faith except a few of them, and they were all put to death. So I think what needs to be understood here is that there is a law of the Almighty in which actually the Quran has used this word of humiliation. And it says that Kataballahu la aghlibanna innal lazina yuhaduna Allah wa rasulahu ulaika fil azallin. This is what the Quran says, that those who deny and who are at war with God and the Prophet, ulaika fil azallin, they have to be humiliated in this world. This is a punishment of denying the truth. And this punishment of denying the truth has two forms. For idolaters or people who have adopted polytheism as their religion, they will not be spared because they are associating partners with God without any argument or reasoning. So they will be put to death come what may. And this happened not only, I mean, this was not only a directive in the times of Prophet Muhammad, it was something which happened regarding all previous ancient Arabic nations, like for the Ad, the Samud, the people of Lot, the people of Noah, all of them were actually put to death for this polytheism of intentionally denying the fact that they were convinced that God is one, but they still associated partners with him. So this is something which the polytheists have been suffering ever since the earliest times. The people of the book, they were regarded as monotheists, and they were given this concession, and they were told that their humiliation will not take the form of the capital punishment. Because they are primarily monotheists, they would be allowed to live on their own religion, but this would be a sign of humiliation for them. They would be made to live in different places, and they will be made to realize that these are the people who have denied the Almighty instead or the Prophet, I would say, in spite of being convinced. So the purpose of the Quran was to actually humiliate them. The word used is humiliation, and the jizya tax, which was actually imposed on them, was a sign of this subjugation. And what has actually been erroneously now understood is, which has caused a lot of atheists and people who are studying critically Islam, is that this particular punishment was just meant for the immediate adversaries of the Prophet Muhammad, because they were the ones who were to be humiliated, no one after them. So the problem which took place was that our jurists, unfortunately, did not draw this line, and a punishment which was just meant for the idolaters of the Prophet Muhammad's era and the people of the book of the Prophet Muhammad's era, because this is basically, as I said, a punishment. It's a divine punishment, and the Almighty and the Prophet and his companions are the instruments of God's justice. So they were required to administer this justice. It was solely confined to them. What happened is that it became a permanent part of our fiqh. So even today, our fiqh manuals, even today, if you pick them up, you'll find that today also you will subjugate the people of the book. You'll impose the jizya tax on them. You'll make them realize that they are second-grade people, without realizing that this is not our prerogative. It was the prerogative of the prophets of God. They were acting as instruments of God's justice on earth, and making people realize that this is what happens when you deliberately and arrogantly deny the message of God.
So let me get this right. So are you actually saying that these directives were only meant to be exercised up to a particular time limit, or up to when the Prophet was alive, or when his message was being conveyed by his four caliphs?
Yes, the immediate adversaries, as long as they were alive, which of course could be a couple of years, maybe one generation after the Prophet. It was until then. After them, this had nothing to do with any other non-Muslim. For the rest, they had to live in. You have to live in peace with them. You have to treat them equally, because you see, this is something of such an important nature that if you don't understand this directive of the Quran, you will end up extending a lot of things which are meant solely for the foremost addressees of Prophet Muhammad into other eras, which include jihad, which include not praying for non-Muslims, which include not saying salam to them. So I have written a book on this actually, and shown that how 8 or 9 or maybe 15, I don't remember, maybe 12 or 15 of these directives which were meant solely for the era of Prophet Muhammad, because of the fact that they constituted a divine punishment. It was God who was administering this punishment. The Sahaba and the Prophet were just instruments of God's justice. They were just carrying out the orders of God.
It confuses me. It confuses me a little bit. Why there is a certain timeline? We got the Muslim Empire. I'm sorry to prolong this, Najia, because the Muslim Empire just kept expanding and expanding and expanding up to a good 500 years after the Prophet's death. So the message of Islam was being conveyed a good 500 years post Prophet's death. And you know, dhimmi status was maintained in Spain. It was maintained in Mauritius, in other countries. So why limit it to a certain time period?
This is because of the law itself. The law says that only the messengers of God are authorized to punish people for arrogance. No one other than the prophets of God is authorized to do so. The Quran has made it abundantly clear at a number of instances. And this law of Itmamul Hujjah, which was actually pointed out for the first time in a very emphatic manner by Ustaz Hamiduddin Farahi, this is one of his crowning achievements. That how important that this is nothing to do with the expansion of the Muslim empire. It is a law which is governed simply by the Almighty regarding only and only His messengers of God. So therefore, as you might have heard, that I always make this distinction that there are two periods of religious history. One is the prophetic period from Adam to Muhammad, and the other is the post-prophetic period from Muhammad to the Day of Judgment. So this prophetic period was the only period in which these laws were to be implemented, because lesser days of judgment were created in the messengers of God, in the times of the messengers of God, so that people living in the post-prophetic period could realize that, look, their judgment took place in this world. Our judgment will also take place. It has only been deferred to the great day of judgment. So this, as I said, perhaps you need to go through that law which has been expounded by Farahi Saab, Islahi Saab, Ghamidi Saab, and I have tried my best to contribute as well in explaining how this important law was something which is meant only when the messenger of God is present. Because see, the fact that there is Itmamul Hujjah, what does it mean? It means conclusive communication of the truth, in which there can be no excuse for the other person. So God says that this is something which can only be done by His messengers. I and you or any other preacher cannot simply go to that length that he can say that, well, the truth has been delivered in its ultimate form. So because of the fact that only messengers deliver the truth in its ultimate form, and the person who ends up denying has no excuse except arrogance. So today, of course, neither a messenger is present, nor can we know if any person is intentionally denying, because in most cases today, it could be because of misinformation, disinformation, even because of the fact that what Muslims do, it makes other people draw even further away from Islam. So today they would have a number of excuses which would be legitimate. But in the times of messengers of God, no legitimate excuse is offered, because God says that He sends His representatives in a way that they convey the truth in such a manner that it's only arrogance which makes the other person deny. He or she is left with no excuse. And hence that punishment which comes as a result is absolutely justified. But in the post-prophetic era, as you said, when the expansion took place, neither were messengers of God there who could present the truth in their ultimate form, and nor could we know whether people were deliberately denying or not. So I have gone at length to explain this, because this is the most fundamental part, or I would say law of the Quran, which if not understood will create so many issues in understanding the whole Islamic faith. And unfortunately, this is what has happened, that every now and then you will get Osama bin Laden or a Mullah Omar or Abu Bakr Baghdadi rising and trying to carry out the same practice which Prophet Muhammad did. And this is what we call as misreading that divine practice, that something which was specific to messengers of God. They think that if they punish the disbelievers, we also have the right to punish disbelievers. So Osama bin Laden actually quoted a Quranic verse long before he attacked those twin towers, and he actually cited that Quranic verse, which was meant for prophets of God and messengers of God, that they have to wage war against these disbelievers because they have denied the truth. And he actually said that, well, I'm going to do the same. So what has happened is that something which was meant specifically for God's messengers, since people were told that, well, God's messengers are ideals for us. Laqad kana lakum fi Rasulillahi uswatun hasana. They are the best exemplars. So instead of realizing that they are best exemplars in certain areas that we need to follow, we started to follow them in every particular affair. It would be much like saying that, look, the Prophet Muhammad was given the prerogative to marry more than 4 women, but the rest of the Muslims didn't have this prerogative because of his special status. Similarly, this qital or jihad which was conducted had a very special status. And if we start doing it even today, it would be as if we would be violating the same directive and thinking that since the Prophet married more than 4 wives, so why shouldn't also we marry more than 4 wives? So it's basically a case of not realizing that there was something which was specific for God's messenger. Because of being divine appointees, because of being God's representatives. But in the post-prophetic era, with the departure of God's messengers, this is no longer the case. And because this has been misunderstood, I unfortunately think that things have gone the wrong way.
Sorry, I'll just ask one more follow-up comment and then I'll shut up because I know the others are waiting. You keep saying that it happens in the post-prophetic era. It was a prophet to exercise the directive of the Itamam Hujjat, but it didn't actually, did it?
Not in the post-prophetic era. In the prophetic
era. But in this particular case of the Dhimmi status, it didn't just stop with the prophet did it. It carried on, and for the four caliphs, because they were then in that sphere of the prophet's judgment of exercise of Itamam Hujjat. They also carried on with the Itamam Hujjat. So I get confused as to why were they allowed, and if they were allowed, why weren't the Umayyads or the Abbasides allowed after that? Because why did we stop?
Yes, I understand. Because that was the generation with amongst whom the prophet was born, and he was able to deliver the truth. The next generation it came after them. So it was confined to the generation which the prophet was able to address. And all those 4 caliphs were, of course, alive at the time of the prophet, and they were they were companions. So until the last companion passed away, which is like 50 or 60 years or 70 years after the death of the prophet, this whole law was in force, and zimmitude or zimmi status was to be implemented. But once these messengers of, the companions of God had passed away, which was within the 1st century, it no longer had to be extended. It should not have been extended. But unfortunately, our jurists did not make this distinction, and they not only extended it after the 1st generation, they have continued to extend it right up till now. So even today, your fiqh manuals will tell us that if you fight the non-believers, you will impose jizya and make them zimmis.
Thank you, Dr. Shehzad. There's other follow-up questions on the same topic. We'll take them, inshallah, tomorrow. Thank you.
Okay, inshallah.